And she does all her recording at home. Does all her recording and then playlist. Using all programming in the computer and this whole week of things.
Oh yeah, it's like kind of
Sit down first. I think we're live right now.
Should I wait? Are more people coming in? I'll wait.
I guess.
Well, that's a really good
But again, the demographic was different.
Come to think of it, there were like no.
Well, and I didn't see it in the bottom.
These are like the chairs in my principal's office.
The chairs are my own. He was in
Clearly,
in town for like 1 day. I'm gonna get everyone else.
These are like, seriously, like your principal's chairs. In the principal's office, when you were in trouble, these were the chairs you sat in.
So did you ever get the strap?
I never got the strap. I went to the National Ballet School. I was terrified. Strapping. We didn't need strapping at the ballet school. It's already in a lot of pain. Seriously.
There's nothing going on where I am. I love it here. There's so much going on. Your part was.
Saturday anniversary. Sorry, Vancouver. Okay, I'm not really sorry. Not church. I was in church today. I know a great little church. Corner of Abbey Road and Bloor, Church of the Redeemer.
Just as I'm always going to do the whole interview up herself, by herself.
Without a microphone.
Welcome back to the Music Business Seminar, Part 2. I'm trying to think if there's anything important to say. Oh yes, I apologize that there was a problem with the food, that dairy-free meals did not exist. Is that true? I apologize profusely. I hope there was something that you could eat and that you didn't start eating each other from hunger. There was just a communication screw-up. Were there vegan meals? Were there gluten-free meals? Was it okay? Okay.
No one looks like they're starving.
Is anyone angry at me? Or what do you call it? Hangry? When you're... Okay, so that's the first thing. Oh, good. Okay, that's what I like. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for. For those at home or at their desktop watching us streamed live, and for everyone here, and I would like to say thank you for hanging out. Been here for a few hours, and there's a couple hours more, and I guarantee that for the second half of the seminar, there's going to be some pretty interesting and insightful stuff. Certainly not coming from me, from our guests. And I would like to introduce, I've known Molly Johnson now for decades. Is that true? Yeah, way back in the, I think we met in the, perhaps in the late 80s.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the last century before the internet.
That's right.
Molly, I'm just going to go just a little bit of hagiography. Molly is one of the most beloved singers in our country. has shown incredible versatility, rock and roll, jazz. She's an incredible songwriter, band leader. You heard of the Infidels? They were a great band that I used to follow. She also, the thing about Molly is that she has been involved more than most musicians, I'd say, that I know, involved in causes, humane causes, including work she's done. She did extensively for people living with AIDS. What do you call it? Member of the Office of the Order of Canada? Member of the... Molly is that?
The one up from the one you saw on Mansbridge or Ross. It's just
So-
the next.
You're a level above Ross Porter, CEO and president of Jazz FM91. Hear that, folks?
I actually am.
Yeah, good. Good.
I like to tell him that whenever I see it. And Mansbridge.
Oh, good, yes. Whenever you see Mansbridge.
Yeah.
Mansbridge will be here later to read the news.
That'd be good.
What was I? There was something. Oh, yeah, I was talking about you.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's an absolute pleasure to have Molly here. I'm sure that we're going to have... The thing about Molly that I've noticed is that, and I did sort of hint at it before, is that I have a set of questions and I have a sense how the next hour is going to go, but I don't think it's going to go that way. I think that there tends to be a wonderful meandering which is only welcome. So please, a round of applause for the magnificent Molly Johnson.
Thank you very much.
So I'm going to grab my questions.
You do that, David. Good luck with that.
Now, you have been in the milieu of entertainment for some time now. So can you just approximate at least how old you were when you first began as a professional entertainer and how you got there?
Well, I was 6 months old when I got my ACTRA card for being the first non-white Ivory Snow baby. And that was in probably 1960. I then morphed into a CBC child actor because Casey and Finnegan lived across the street from me, didn't they? Casey, boy or girl? Anyone know?
It's fluid. It's fluid.
Well, way before Pat on Saturday Night Live was Casey. Do you remember that? Okay, not to date myself, but I love dating myself. So before Pat, and remember Lauren Michaels grew up in Toronto watching Mr. Dress Up, and for that matter, Casey and Finnegan. Just saying. So they lived at the lovely Judith Lawrence, who was the creator of Casey and Finnegan and the Tickle Trunk, actually lived across the street from us. We lived in a neighborhood full of CBC types and artist types, and yeah, so, and that morphed, into a Mervish family affair that lasted for decades.
Can you just, sorry, you're throwing things out that you think are just so natural. Can you just maybe describe, so when you say the Mervish family affair, what does that mean?
Well, that means that my mother went back to law school and she left me with a portrait painter who had a studio on Markham Street, and she was my babysitter. It was the 60s and there were very few brown-skinned people in Toronto, like really none. I was the only brown-skinned kid in my entire public school. Fabulous, I was so popular. Can't even believe how popular I was. Oh my God. Heaven. Anyhow. My mother, being, inclined to civil rights activities, quickly picked up that Ed was kicking out all the artists on Markham Street to make an artists' enclave, which of course the artists couldn't afford to live in. So my mother was of course pointing this out to him one day on Markham Street when my brother and I skipped down the stairs to get picked up by her. My brother and I both being brown-skinned, my mother being blonde and blue-eyed. And Ed looked at my mom and said, "Where do these kids come from?" And my mother said, "From me." And he then went on to call the house when he needed kids for whatever shows he was doing. So Finian's Rainbow, Annie Get Your Gun, just a million, just on it went. And there were no agents. It was Ed and my mom. And if my brother's homework was done, we were then put in a cab and sent down to the theater, the Royal.
Sorry, was he honest?
He was very honest. I adored Ed, and I absolutely love his son David, who I kind of grew up with, who I think is such a great guy for doing such wonderful things in his father's name, because David would have been happy with a bookstore on Markham Street, quite frankly. To see him in those kinky boots was really out of this world. So I about her little brown-skinned kids and where they were going to fit into this world. So I think she thought the theater would be a safe place for us to be, and she was kind of right, kind of wrong, as mothers tend to be. Being one myself now, I understand how I can be.
Was there a point at which, I think there's a difference, I'm just projecting because I don't know, but I think there's a difference between being a kid, a child in showbiz, and then being at a point where you decide, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
Yeah,
was there a point where you went...
There was a point where I knew what I didn't want to do. I'm really good at that. Yeah. Really good at it. When I was about 11, and I was going to the National Ballet School just as a Saturday kind of... I remember doing a show at the Crest Theater on Eglinton Avenue, and it was a show called The Me Nobody Knows, and there were piles of kids auditioning for it, and we were all on the stage, and they called the winners up, again, I hate theater, up to the lip of the stage, and we were now going to be the cast of this show going forward, and as family legend has it, I said to everybody in the audience, which at that time would have been the director and the producer and all these mothers, and not my mother, of course, she was busy solving problems around the world. We were put in a cab and sent to the theater. The farthest thing away from a stage mother you could ever imagine was my mother. We have no photos of any of this, by the way, if you're wondering. Aren't you even cute? None. She was not there taking pictures. Anyhow, I stepped to the lip of the stage and said this was going to be my last acting job because being Molly Johnson was going to be a full-time job. And I just stepped away from acting, and I hated it, and I didn't want to be a ballerina, I wanted to be a choreographer. I wanted to make stuff.
Okay, so then let me reiterate it, because you are now a famous singer. So at what point, I didn't ask properly, at what point did you go, I've heard there's some people in Paris who know about you too.
Yeah.
But anyway, at what point did you go, I want to be a singer, like, or I want to be in music, I want to be a musician?
Well, I was going to the National Ballet School. I was very, very in love with it. But really seeing that now there's women choreographers everywhere. But in those days, to be a choreographer and be a girl was an insane thought. And we had this amazing fine arts teacher at the National Ballet who was already 3,000 years old when she taught us. And she just retired like 5 years ago, so I don't know what the hell. But she was awesome. And her job was to teach all of us dancers about the creative world outside of dance. You do in the corps de ballet, right? You support and love and adore her. Look what she's done. Look what she's done for the ballet. Come on now. So we saw all of this. It wasn't just ballet, 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 ballet. And if we weren't smoking, we were eating. If we weren't eating, we were being yelled at. Because if you weren't yelled at, you weren't worth correcting. Hear me when I say that. You must have a favorite teacher that spent a little bit of extra time with you, right? It's a really great thing. Okay, so think geography, and there's Maitland Street. And if you drew a line right to Yonge Street, you hit the Colonial Tavern and the Lecoq d'Or and Soul Palace, some of the great clubs on Yonge Street of the day of the 70s, right? And there was Sean Jackson singing with her brother Jay. She made her own dresses.
She was just in this room singing a couple weeks ago. A legend. She's amazing.
She's a legend. She made her own dresses. She wrote her own songs. And I used to sneak up on the balcony in my National Ballet School uniform, which included a hairnet, and would look down at her. But it was the songwriting. It was that she made stuff. And it was the first time I'd seen a woman front a band singing songs she wrote. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And by the way, way easier than what I was doing down the road at the National Ballet School. So, that's sort of how it happened. I never really went, oh my God, I can't wait to be a singer. I don't even actually like singing. I find it really dumb. Is that on film? Because I really hope it is. For all you singers, it's annoying. I use my singing powers to do good. I use that to focus and funnel on all the great things I can do, because I'm Canadian famous.
Can you just for the sake, for this benefit of the studio audience, just clarify what you mean by singing is annoying? What do you mean by that?
I'll think about it. Singers, everybody hates singers. Oh. Seriously. Yeah.
No, that's singers are annoying, not for you, the process of singing. What do you mean?
You know, if you're not writing your own songs, if you don't have your own things to say, you should stay home. You understand me? You're clogging up the industry with garbage.
Amen.
Okay, you understand what I'm saying? If you don't have something to say, be an audience. Because audiences are what drive me. It's boring for me right up until I get in the van with my band, who are outrageous, hilarious. 25 years with Michael Downs. Doesn't get any funnier than that. I crave the jokes. I crave them. It's so awful what we do. It's just awful. So much fun. This I love. And then I get on stage and I see you. And I go, okay, well, there's a reason for me to be here, and there's people here, and I got a job to do, and I do it. But I don't live to sing. I need to be cajoled. There's so many other things I love to do, like my jazz festival, like all kinds of things, like raise my kids. Love it. Love being a mom. Oh my God, I love being a mom. There's my job. That's a great thing. So, singing, it's, it's... Like I said, I didn't wake up one day, going, I gotta sing. I gotta sing. No, I don't gotta sing. Seriously.
May I just be devil's advocate for a second? Because you've said some pretty heavy things here.
Try to couch them in a light kind of way.
So let's say there's someone in the room, not me, I don't sing professionally anymore.
By the way, David has a remarkable voice. Like, I can't even tell you that here's a person that you could actually stand to listen to sing, who's clearly not doing much of that anymore.
Anyway, so the point, let's say...
So I'm not alone in that, in other words.
Let's say there's people, yes, true. Let's say there's people in the room, though, who like to sing, thank you, who like to sing standards, say, or like to sing songs by other folks. Is it possible, this is kind of a philosophical question, is it possible, because you said something quite, I would say, extreme, where you said that if you have nothing to say, meaning if you're not a songwriter, then stay home. Is it possible to have something to say within the structure, pre-made structure of a song that someone else wrote? Is it possible? Because you sing standards, you sing...
I do sing standards, and I don't change the lyric, and I play an insane homage to that writer, and I sing those songs like a songwriter, not like a
that's
singer.
The point. Yeah.
I sing them like a songwriter. I sing them with a lot of respect. I don't change them, even though clearly mean to me. We girls don't deal with that anymore. Like, we haven't really in, I don't know, I like to say 20 years. Girls, ladies, are you with me? But that doesn't, you've got to come at these standards with a kind of gravitas and a kind of understanding of the history and an understanding of where they came from. But I did a straight-on Billy record because people were really bugging me about that. So I did a Billy record. It took me 3 days. I learned the songs the day I sang them and never sang them again. But there's your Billy record. We made it a charitable thing for the Boys and Girls Club. We raised a lot of money for the Boys and Girls Club, all here and in the U.S. We actually got to take Billy's royalties for a year after I bullied their label into it. for a year. Those royalties went into the Boys and Girls Club, and for once in Billy's life, she actually got to do something with her royalties. Like, that'd be a lesson to you songwriters. Protect your royalties. Okay, I'm not answering. Yeah, you.
No, you're doing a fine job.
Am I?
Is she doing a fine job? Now you've already answered this, half answered this, but I think you could elaborate a bit. I asked Matt when he was here too. I said, can you name 2 or 3 formative records or performances that really have meant a lot to you in terms of your style and your singing and your musicianship? You said seeing Sean Jackson at the Colonial.
Yeah.
Are there other experiences like that, or records that have been important, or like influences?
Sean was big because I was such a kid, and she really showed me the way. She actually did. With the Billy thing, I made a point of not listening to Billy. Like, I actually shut her down because I was so annoyed. There's that word again. I'm old. I get to use it a lot. I was so annoyed with people going, "Oh, you're just like Billy." Like, I'm nothing like Billie Holiday. Give me a break. I grew up in a very privileged, clearly, I went to the National Ballet School. I was the only brown kid in my class. I wasn't raised in Philadelphia in the dark, deep ghetto. Like, I had a very privileged life, and I had that life because my parents and their generation kicked ass for me. So I broke every rule for me, created an incredible life of privilege for me. The last thing I was going to do was fall into all the terrible, horrible things that happened to Billie Holiday. So it annoyed me when people said, "You're just like Billie." Are you kidding me? I'm nothing like Billie Holiday. I'm because of Billie Holiday, for fuck's sakes. And that was the message with the Billie Holiday record. Anytime anybody asked me, I got to say exactly that. Everywhere, anywhere, constantly. We need to talk about that. So, I didn't listen to Billie, and frankly, I was in a rock band called the Infidels. We were listening to Aerosmith. Altamoda was even more insane because I had a blonde mohawk and wore 1950s bathing suits and was so anti-car and so anti-oil in the Middle East and so crazily political, which clearly I have not lost a lot of that. But yeah, Altamoda was, we were the dance band for the punks. We were a band that played to pre-recorded audio and video. We had a video artist in the band. He filmed and made films that ran alongside us on monitors. It was insane. We had to borrow all the TVs or we couldn't do the gig. Couldn't play on a Friday night because everybody was at home watching Dallas. It was a problem.
Probably not the best business model.
No, I've never had a good business model, and you know that as you handed me a payment for today, and I didn't realize I was getting paid.
It's like, what's this? What's this piece of paper? Can I tell a story? Can I tell a brief story? So I was once, this will lead somewhere pertinent. I was once in your apartment and you weren't there. So it was in Kensington Market. You go down a laneway and there's a cul-de-sac. Am I right?
House.
Your house, yeah. I was in there. My best friend at the time was your bass player, Gordy Johnson. And I was in there, and suddenly you burst through the door with 2 other people, and I've been singing all day, like that. I've just been singing at a session for Tom Cochrane. And it was that tune, wasn't it? Yeah. So you'll hear Molly on Life is a Highway. Oh, she's on that. Zero money?
Zero money.
You got paid for the session, though.
$262.
There you go, and no royalties to that.
Well, here's the problem here.
But jingles, you get royalties.
Here's the problem with old Tom.
This is not where I want it, but go ahead, go ahead.
We are talking the music business, aren't we? Well, how old was I? 20-something? Yeah, he sampled my voice. He's been using that for the last 25 years live.
So when he plays it live, someone presses a button on a keyboard and you...
Really?
Ask me how much I'm making on that.
Yeah. How much? You just said.
Zero.
Yeah.
$0.
What does Molly Johnson do? Does Molly call up and say, "Where the heck? What are you doing?"
Nah,
Or, no.
can't be bothered. You'll get it in the end. We all get it in the end.
Yeah.
I know what I sang. I know I was a kid. I know that to get there for that session was crazy because I took a cab and I didn't know where Metalworks was. And
Oh, that's expensive.
Yeah.
yeah, and the cab broke down, and the cab driver was a motorcycle guy, and I had a bike at the time, so we talked bikes for a bit. Now this is before cell phones, and he called up a few of his buddies, and I got on the back of one of them motorcycles, and that guy drove me to my gig. And that could have been the last time you ever saw Molly Johnson. Never mind, life is a highway. But nope, I promised this guy I'd introduce him to Tom Cochran. I didn't even really know who Tom Cochran was.
How'd you? But here's my. I was leading somewhere.
Okay.
It's because yes, you can say that you didn't make any money in the gig, but you did make. For some people, $266 at that point would have been okay. So
Yeah.
how does it? So what was it that led you to break into to session singing, to being a back singer and all that stuff? How did you get into that scene? Because you've done a lot of voice work, you've done a lot of singing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. The backup singing stuff. Love being a backup singer. Now that's a good singing
That's
gig
fun,
because you got no pressure. You're just stupid.
You gotta get the steps right though.
Yeah. I got to do that for Celine Dion, who is one of the most magnificent creatures ever to grace this earth. She is absolutely what you think she is, and more. Just nutso. Genius, brilliant, beautiful, generous, kind, and probably the funniest person.
Celine Dion.
Yeah, man.
I know she owns Schwartz's in Montreal now.
Thank God she does. Like, she's paying for half of Montreal right now. She's an amazing creature.
So how did you break into backup singing?
It was Jeff Healey. I don't know, Jeff. I did a lot of singing for Jeff. Who I'm pretty sure wasn't blind, based on the way he carried himself. The guy had more sight than all of us. It was ridiculous. His sense of smell, his sense of hearing, his sense of space and time. Oh my God, what a magnificent creature.
Yeah.
Magnificent person.
Remember that Matt talked about the Battle of the Bands? I was in a band with Jeff Healey at the concert hall when I was 17.
Really?
I'm a soul man!
Yeah, right. David can sing, right? You have no idea.
Anyway, sorry. So
I guess it was Jeff, and then it was that same producer that produced Jeff that also produced Laura from the Leslie Spitt Trio and also produced Tom Cochran. His name is Joe Hardy. He also did the ZZ Top records. And, oh my God, this guy, Joe Hardy, amazing producer. I learned so much from that guy. And basically, this is before auto-tune. So Joe would actually have me come in and sing entire songs and get the melody, get it exactly right. And then Joe or whoever, singer, would come in and use my vocal as a guide track and then mix it out or mix it in. So I was a guide track singer for ages. I'm not a good harmony singer, as Celine quickly found out. I don't do parts. I don't do much, but I'm a lot of fun, and I look great. So there was that. There's a lot of that. An awful lot of that. I was trained as a dancer, not as a singer, so I didn't have...
But what's the magic ingredient? Because, I'm trying to hem it and get to a place where we can get an idea of advice or ideas for... Why did you keep getting called back if you can't harmonize? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, what is it? What was that magic ingredient?
Secret sauce. No idea. I'm the daughter of a coach. My father was a coach, an excellent coach. Grew up with a guy with just about every sport you can imagine. He taught himself to ski, he taught himself to play hockey, he He did all kinds of things. He lived in an Adidas tracksuit with an afro. He was super bad. Like, man, super bad. Had a ragtop Firebird, red convertible in the 70s. Lived in Rosedale. He is a black man in Rosedale. Just need to say that out loud a few times. Man, he was happening, but he was a great coach. You know, he taught me a couple of things. Surround yourself with great players. Give them lots of room to be great. Lots of room to be great. This is leadership. You know you've built a great team and you can walk out of the room and it doesn't fall apart. How many times do I walk off stage and Robbie Botosh can play for 2 hours? I don't need to be there. I do take advantage of that, by the way. But he taught me, how to build a great team, how to work with people. My mother was a civil rights lawyer. I mean, nothing says strength and power as a little tiny white woman in South Africa. Working with Nelson Mandela, working with Fidel Castro, working with Jimmy Carter. Like, these are people that were in my grill growing up. No time for me to complain that my mother wasn't home, because clearly, your mother used to say, there's people starving in Africa, you should eat those vegetables. There's kids overseas, don't have no. Okay, my mother had those people in our kitchen. Like, they were at the table. So I grew up with a great sense of community and teamwork. I guess growing up also in theater and television as a small child, and really understanding what happens behind the scenes and how critical these people are. Again, with singers, they walk up to the microphone and start singing, yay, yay. Do you know that people have been there for hours to make sure that when you walk up and hit that microphone to sing, the lights are right, the sound is right, the audience is there, they're paid in full, and we're ready to go. That took a team of people to do that. And the day you don't know that is the day, again, maybe you should stay home or take up something that doesn't involve working with a team, like, I don't know, tennis or swimming. I don't know, what is a non-team sport? But the entertainment business is a team sport, and to not respect and understand how you got there and what that light means, I learned all those things. Those are, I don't get on stage with told me I never hire anybody I wouldn't have dinner with. He was talking about his plumber. I'm talking about my bass player. 25 years, Michael Downs. 16 years, Robbie Botosh. 10 years, Larnell Lewis. 20 years, Davide Lorenzo. I mean, these are Canada's greatest musicians. I just listed there.
But they're also mensch, they're great people, right? That's what you're saying.
The business is a joke. It's a nightmare. It's extremely tough. You're dealing with a whole bunch of people that really want to be where you are and aren't, so they're mean and mad. Get that through your heads. That's who you're dealing with every day. So when you get on stage, or you get to where you need to be, you better have really great people with you, because the rest of it's bullshit, right? It's bullshit. So.
May I? Yeah. I'm not contradicting you. I'm saying that there might be, there's a sort of balancing act. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, there is a balance.
Because I think also, and I think you and I have discussed this, that we are in an era of do-it-yourself as well. There's a kind of do-it-yourselfy thing.
Oh,
and I know that. So.
Not me so much.
But do-it-yourselfy, but also being part of a team. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Like, so what would you say? What's a toolkit for, say, let's say, a musician gets out of school, trained, great player, wants to, I don't know, be in the Kensington Jazz Festival, wants to get a recording out there, wants to do stuff. What's some ideas they can use to move forward? Because I know this is, I know that you have concrete ideas in this area.
Well, experience. I mean, I worked with this young kid from grade 4 to grade 12. He just did a show. He has a record deal with Universal. He's in grade 12. I knew in grade 4, this kid had so much going on. He's a country and western singer, the most authentic voice you've ever heard. I told him in grade 5, you need to start writing songs. You know what? He did. He did. He did. And he's graduating from grade 12. He has a Nashville manager. He's going to Berkeley. He's happening. His mother asked me, what can I do? What can I do? I said, every open mic, every opportunity for him to get in front of an audience and play his songs, just do it. Just do it. He's living at home. He doesn't need to make money. Just get him out there and just season him. Just season him. Just let him play in front of noisy, smelly bars of people that don't care whether he's there or not. And he's not old enough to be there, so you have to be there with him. And she did that. And I loved his focus. I loved his dedication, his authenticity. This is a kid in high school who loves country and western music, and he's surrounded by, well, you can imagine the music he's surrounded by. And yet, as popular and friendly and happy a child and well-adjusted a child he has been, he managed this, he stayed very true to his music and his thing. And that's why he's successful and will be successful.
So you've said it before, but I want you to say it again.
Okay.
How important is the songwriting concept, and why? And say, let's say someone's in jazz, in quotes. Does that apply, and what?
It applies to anything. Because you have to, in the business world, own the songs. I mean, I made the Billy record. It was all Billy songs. But if you look prior to that, it was kind of a split between my stuff I wrote and covers. Mostly because I had children. And I didn't have the headroom to write in depth. I mean, there were just too many dentist appointments and broccoli that needed to be scraped off the floor for me to be diligently writing. It's a very selfish thing, and that does not work at all with motherhood. There is absolutely no room for selfishness. And who's a mother in this room? Okay. So we know that there's no room for that. So ladies who haven't had children yet, I suggest you postpone that as long as possible and get your shit done. Because I did that. I postponed as long as possible. My career was at a particular point where I could step in and out of it. And I stepped in and out of it. And I used standards to help me do that. I used Air France that had a 7:00 a.m. flight on Friday morning that got you into France Friday evening. Or Thursday night, I took the flight. I got into France Friday morning. I did interviews all day. I did a show Friday night. I flew or trained somewhere else in France Saturday and was back on a plane Sunday and packing lunches on Monday morning. Okay, so
and you weren't tired, I'm sure. It was a
no, and I made records. I have no idea what those, I don't know. There's even one record in particular, the album jacket, I look depressed. Because guess what? I was! It's purple. I'm like this. I'm sure you've seen it. Anyhow,
but you still have originals on those records. So you're saying it's split. Yeah.
I did, because that's what I love to do the most, is write songs and write and work, collaborate with those songwriters. I love, those are my hours of sheer happiness, is when I'm in a room with one of those guys.
Can you discuss that, being in the room with one of those guys, and how you make that happen, and who those guys are? And
well, like for instance, on this new record that the single just came out, and on this new record, Davide Lorenzo, our beloved Davide Lorenzo, one of Canada's greatest drummers and an amazing musician, but he's a drummer who happens to play the piano, as I happen to know, and he also plays the guitar. He's a very good musician. In the true sense, and I said, Davide, let's write some tunes for this new record. Let's write some songs that people can move to. Let's write some songs that have some gravitas around what's going on in the world right now. So we're looking into the canons of people like Mavis Staples and protest and my roots in my parents' music. And we thought about this. Songwriting for me always starts with conversations with people I want to write with. I always have a very clear idea of my direction. Frankly, if I didn't, I'd have been blown apart about 16 times by now. You have to really understand what you want to say and how you want to say it. And that's when you start to bring other people into the room, right? And so with Davide, we talked about the kind of songs I felt like I wanted to sing for the next 2 or 3 years. See, that's the other piece. I got to get out there and sing those things. So what do I want to be saying? What do I want my audience to be doing while I'm saying it? Who is my audience? Who am I talking to? Who are you people? What are your stories? The best songs are songs about you, not me. I don't write about me, I write about you. You'll see me on the streetcars eavesdropping. You'll see my crazy eclectic group of friends who have nothing to do with the music business at all, at all. That's where I get my stories. That's where I hear from you, is that way. So I get into a room knowing who I want to talk to, who I'm talking to, and what are the stories you want to hear. And I try and write those. I want you to see me in my songs, but I want you to see you in my songs, mostly. This is critical to songwriting, is who you're talking to, right? So I get in a room with these guys, we have conversations. There's no music involved. Talking. They go away, and they start throwing me bed tracks, piano, bass, and drums, or whatever they got on hand. And they start throwing stuff at me, and what sticks, I start writing to. I sit at my piano. I'm a ballerina. I'm not a piano player. I'm a ballerina. I have great posture at the piano. I look amazing at the piano. But I don't actually play the piano. More than, you know, what you can imagine a ballerina has figured out on the piano. My children had piano lessons. Mom, not so much. Should have, but I didn't. Anyhow, so I can, with their track, I can plunk out melody, I can plunk out lyric. I'm constantly writing into journals. I'm constantly writing on scraps of paper. I write the best between 6 and 8 a.m. I'm an early morning person. That's a deep, dark secret about Molly Johnson. I'm an absolute morning person. Just partly why you never see me in the clubs is because I'm in bed. With Peter Mansbridge, back in the old days.
You're in bed with Peter Mansbridge. Yeah, we'll just leave it there. Related to this, though, is that this is a jazz-oriented audience, I think many of the people here, and a lot of them are not therefore singers necessarily. Right. So let's say you're talking to an instrumentalist. So right. Does it make sense? I mean, there's the instrumental jazz. So it's about writing.
It's about writing, okay. And it's about putting together little combos and getting out and making work. You're self-employed, people. I don't even know my next job. I actually do not know. And I have a new record out. And I do not actually, we're working on a tour, but I can legitimately say right now, I don't know what the hell I'm going to be doing in a month. And I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to pay my mortgage. So, let that be a little grounding lesson. You have to go out and make your own work. I discovered with Kensington Market Jazz that there is an audience for live music. It is undeniable. There were 4,000 paying people in Kensington Market over the weekend. 4,000 of them. The common thread of all the businesses was, wow, a whole bunch of people in the market I haven't seen here before. So clearly, we brought them. We brought them with social media. We worked like crazy in our social media to make sure that every one of our venues was stuffed so that we could clearly say to our artists, you're working for the door. By the way, guys, just a little tip. When you play Massey Hall, which I've done twice, you're working for the door. I don't know where musicians got off with, well, I don't work for the door. What the hell else are you working for? Bar sales? No. You know, you need to make a deal with the club or with the bar. They get the bar, you get the door. You get the door, you go nuts on social media, you have no guest lists. Here's the thing, they love you, they're your mom, they're your cousin, pay! How much do you love me? Pay! It's not rocket science. We did busking in the market this year, curated busking. It was fantastic after I talked these A-line musicians into busking. This was a feat to convince them that I would create an environment for them where they could make $200 to $300 in an hour and a bit. And it worked. We curated busking in non-music venues throughout the market. Was anyone at Tom's? We took 13 racks of clothes out of his store. We put them in a truck around the corner if you're wondering where they went. He has one door in that store. One regular sized door. We got a 14-foot grand piano in there and a stage. We created an environment for music. This is doable. You've got a restaurant at the bottom of your street. Put some music in there. Get it in there. Our slogan at Kensington Market Jazz Festival is promoting live musical excellence since 2016. This is true. There's an appetite for it. I've proven it time and time again. Look at the model of Kensington Market Jazz. This is an artist-driven, volunteer-fueled event. There are no banks. My Rolodex.
We do love TD though, don't we? Yes, we love TD. Anyway, so go on, sorry.
I do other things with the bank, like Canadian Black History projects. I do lots of things with TD. I love TD on their corporate responsibility, absolutely. I will have discussions with them about their jazz festivals, but rather than that, I just created my own. I think that speaks for all kinds of things. But what I'm really trying to impress upon you is that you want to make a living at this business, you have to go out and make a living at this business. No one's going to hand this shit to you. They didn't hand it to Justin Bieber either, by the way. I've known him since he was 11 years old. The kid works his ass off, non-stop. Makes it look easy. That's the nature of this business. It is not easy, but it is doable. I mean, Justin is clearly of the 1%. I know lots of working musicians. Can I just use an example of someone who I think has it 100% right? And that's Mike Downs. Mike Downs is an exceptional father. Let's just start. I can't tell you what a great dad he is. He's a great husband. He's a great dad. It starts in that pocket. The guy's head of the bass department. He writes textbooks. He gigs constantly. He plays live constantly, which to me speaks to there's a teacher for you. There's a real teacher for you because he's actually in the trench. He makes records. He wins Junos. He's nominated for another one, which is annoying to me because now if he wins it, I can't say I have the most Junos on stage. Though he and I can look at Robbie. Neither of them have an Order of Canada, so I still have that. But Michael is, if you want a role model, if you want to look at somebody who's actually doing it, that for me is the guy that's doing it and making it happen. I remember years and years ago, though, I said to him that my dad had written a textbook on kinesiology in 1978. And that textbook is still used if you study kinesiology. So my mother, after my father passed away, consistently received a royalty on that. It's not a big royalty, but it's a royalty. I told Mike Downs that story in the back of a van, driving to some hellish gig somewhere. And look at Mike Downs. He's written a textbook. I believe he's written 2. He's a spokesperson for that crazy electric bass thing. Like, diversify. Yeah, I did a lot of voice work, paid my bills, but I had a little rule. I'll talk about a hamburger, but I won't sing about a hamburger. Do you understand? You see what I'm saying here? I'll talk about it, but I won't sing about it. That's the church. I don't sell that off, because I mentioned earlier, I'm not too fond of doing it, but I'll talk. And I can say, just $1.99. And that, I'm using all the skill sets, all the tools in my box that I have for singing, timing, which word to emote on, where to take a breath, where not to breathe, how fast I gotta go, how many words do I have to get in here and still tell that story. All those pieces to the pie, I can use on a voiceover job. But I don't sing. I sang once on a Ford commercial because it was filled wire, musically directing a massive band, and it was live off the floor. I couldn't resist that. It was a standard. I couldn't resist it. I went on to be Ford until they kind of discovered I don't have a driver's license. Has a bit of an eye-opener.
It's called acting. It's called acting.
Well, I didn't think it mattered much, but apparently it did. Anyhow.
I would just like you, please,
Yes.
because I want to open it up to questions in a couple minutes. Can you you already mentioned the Kensington Jazz Festival, which I think is just this phenomenon. It's just an amazing thing. The Kensington Jazz Festival happens in Toronto, September. Can you talk a little bit more about it, because it is a very special, unique jazz festival, and you kind of you did intimate what's different and special about it. So can you talk about was there a philosophy that it came out of? Was there?
The big philosophy is cash only. 2 words, cash only. So that made it very simple for us with Rev Canada, for instance. I don't touch no money. I didn't touch a cent. What makes it special is my little team of Ori Dagan and Jean-Pierre Marentet and Celine Peterson and Marva Wisdom, big sister of Garvia. So if you think Garvia is formidable, meet her sister.
Garvia Bailey, the host of the morning show here at Jazz FM.
Yes, this is her big sister Marva. We do it because we love it. It's an invitation only. We invite the musicians we love. We look and see who's working, who's in the trench, who's committed to this music, who's committed to this career. We look at those commitments. This isn't about fostering new talent. I can give a shit. We have a youth stage. It's pretty darn awesome. It's an amazing piece of the festival, but this is a festival for people who've really put the time in, who really deserve support for this. And because it's artist-driven, i.e. me, and my bar is very, very, very high. Larnell Lewis's bar is very high. Mike Downs' bar is very high. Robbie Botash's bar is very high. So if the instruments work for us, they work for everybody. So Yamaha supplies. It's all donated, crazy, beautiful stuff that happens. I work with donors as opposed to corporates. I work with individuals on venues that need support. Most of the venues don't need support because they're working bars all year round. I did not have to reinvent the wheel. Supermarket existed, Trinity Common existed. Poetry needed a lot of work, but it exists, and it's fantastic. It still needs some work, but we're getting there. But you understand, like, I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I didn't have to rent porta potties. I didn't have to insure, spend enormous amounts of money on insurance. I have one outdoor stage. It's in a parking lot. It's a big band stage. We can cover that. We covered that stage last year. So we don't leave a lot up to chance. It's indoors for the most part. And I don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like I said, like it exists in the neighborhood. And the neighborhood itself is a partner. So Kensington as a neighborhood is a partner with us. We've started a piano lesson school for kids in Kensington, thanks to Tom of Tom's paying for a piano teacher, who I identified and lessons are being given on a piano that Yamaha left for this purpose. We're able to do things. We've helped in some recordings of some of the artists that are under our umbrella. Billy Newton-Davis, for instance. We put together a great package, fundraised for Billy, got Billy recorded on 14 songs with Mike Downs arrangements, paid for by private donors. Billy's off to the races. He's got 14 beautifully charted songs. He's got an EPK. We put a nice little band together for him. The next one out of the box is Laura Hubert. We are doing a live recording at Poetry with Laura. We will film her. We will record her. She will get a live CD and an EPK out of it. I'm working on a very interesting project with Jazz FM that I can't announce yet, but will very, very soon. But it's excruciatingly exciting and will build our artists and support our artists around Ontario. Having Kensington Market Jazz Festival, having our little office in the market, has enabled us through the year to do many cool and delightful things.
Here's a question. You talked about how it's invite only.
Yes.
That it's not about applying to the festival.
That's right.
And that you have a bar, and you talked about how
Yes, I do.
Larnell and Davide, and you all at the same bar.
Yeah.
So, and you said that it's people who deserve the gigs. What is that? Is it that they're such great players? Is it what's that list of things that puts them into that zone?
Well,
is it they're great at social media? Because there's a lot of people who think that that's a sign.
No, it's not. They're great. In fact, many of the artists we booked, we had to build them, Davide Lorenzo, social media. In fact, Celine Peterson sat and did 400 Facebook pages, and Facebook actually shut us down at one point. We had wonderful conversations with Facebook about that.
What's the criteria?
The criteria is when you look at guys like Ori Dagan, who's in the clubs nightly. Geneviève, she is in the clubs nightly. Celine Peterson, they're performing, or they're visiting, or they're looking, or they're watching, or they're listening. They're actually in there, in those clubs. So we're looking for people, like I said, that have committed and are in there working it. It's not about success at it. It's about commitment to it. That's our bar. And having it be invitation only, because frankly, I don't have the people in the room. Like, can you imagine if we had submissions? I would spend all my time playing God. No, they're not good enough. No, I like them, but I don't. I mean, there's enough of that goes on in the room, trust me. But we have a Rolodex of over 400 musicians all living in Toronto, right? So, and we vetted that deeply. Looked at our venues, looked at what we had available to put these artists in, and then really had a deep look at who these players were and what they were doing with their free time. So that's sort of what that was. The invitation-only piece revolves around that, and it revolves around the piece of just keeping it small and tight and intimate and not getting a million. I've turned down grants. I know that sounds insane, but a grant, we only want to pay the artist. The artist is paid. I need operations. I need my rent paid. I need my staff paid. I figured out before I even went into this how to pay the artist. Are you kidding me? Of course we figured that piece out. They're getting paid. What I need is operations. They want to give me $30,000. Sounds great. You divide $30,000 over 400 musicians. You play God and decide this guy's worth this. I'm not doing that shit. I'm going to put you in a venue. We're going to stuff it. And at the end of it all, we're going to have some fried chicken, a biscuit, some cold beer, and go the hell home with cash money in our pockets. That's a jazz festival to me. So last year we introduced a kind of this busking thing. We've been dabbling around, because we can't do it all, as magnificent as we are, with guest curators. And we discovered that when we invite a musician we love, take for instance Eric Saint-Laurent. We invited Eric, we gave him slots in a club, said fill them, and he did. beautifully with artists, musicians we were not in our wheelhouse. And we did it with George Kohler. And we realized, well, this is a very interesting way to bring in artists that might not be in our grill by inviting the artists we love and trust and respect to curate for us. So this year, Dave Wall's doing some curation for us. Colleen Allen is doing some curation for us. George Kohler will do a curation for us again. Heather Bambrick will do curation for us again. Jane Bennett is doing some curation for us this year. So that's, I think, 5, maybe 6, I'm not good with numbers, artists that will bring a whole new bunch of faces in. And this is, in my view, a way of keeping it fresh and as deeply controlling as I clearly am. This is a way of...
Perhaps the invitation-only thing becomes less potentially cliquish.
This is it.
Right.
And you know, cliques can be good, cliques can be hellish. But always having, you know, I like fluid. I like things moving. We're really hoping the park in the market gets open this year because I've got some phenomenal ideas for the park and for the neighbors and for the restaurants around that park. But I don't even know if they're going to get it open. So, holding on that. Yeah, but that's how that festival runs. It's 4 people in a room, looking at everything, with this huge. Oh, we send an artist invite out, with a Google Doc attached, and those artists fill in that attachment, right, and send it back to us. Then we do an insane algorithm of so-and-so's available on the Wednesday, but he wants to play with so-and-so. So we got to do this. We do
Nightmare.
This. It's an awesome puzzle that we feel privileged to do, because other festivals absolutely do not do that. This is a differentiator with us, is we actually know how many people want to have a day in their band, for instance. And we're looking at, okay, now we're going to look at where we can put Dab a Day. It's an amazing puzzle. It takes weeks, once we get back from the artists their availabilities, to then start to put them into those venues, right?
So there was a whole heck of a lot discussed there. Do people have questions?
One person. That's how good I am. I answered all the questions.
Yes, what would you like to ask?
I wrote this question down because I think you're a very strong female presence in the area of music. I'm a third-year vocalist in university at the moment, and as a woman and a vocalist in this program, I've kind of experienced some issues with being seen as an equal, whether that's female versus male, or a vocalist versus someone with a separate instrument. And we just recently had a master class where a musician a lot of us looked up to pretty much talked the whole time about how we have to play like a man, and even mocked a female vocalist.
I love mocking female vocalists myself.
But but I wanted to know if you faced any like
mocking?
No, well,
Kidding me?
struggles being like
a girl,
a vocalist, a woman in the stream, and what you did to kind of rise above it, I guess, and you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me re-ask the question for the camera. Have you experienced being mocking or being lessened because you're a woman in music and also a singer, and how have you risen above it? Does that
yeah.
probably so?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I always had a few roles. As a 15-year-old bar singer, not a U of T vocalist, but singing in bars and looking out into the audience and seeing drunk girls and seeing how easily they were taken advantage of. So quickly learned, A, I don't drink, and B, I don't sleep with musicians, ever. They're my best friends, they're my partners. You just separate yourself from that, number one. Number two, lead the band. It's your band. Another reason I didn't sleep with the guitar player was bad enough. Everybody thought I was sleeping with the guitar player. Had to deal with that my whole freaking life. Like literally had to say, I'm not sleeping with this guy here. He had the best, he still has that hair. And I still don't sleep with him. Strangely. I don't know if that's helpful. I think that this whole situation that's going on with men and women these days in the workplace, I'm a believer in civil rights. I'm a believer in equality. And unfortunately, the world we live in, money talks, bullshit walks. Until women are paid the same as men for the same job, we will be dealing with their bad behavior. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's number one. We will never clear that up until we're equal financially. Because it just, well, you just make as much money as me, so clearly she's not worth as much as me, so therefore I can bump with her. You understand what I'm saying? So until we have equality, I hate to bring it to money, because I'm not good with money. But I have to say that that will be the differentiator. And it's, you know, we have to fix that. That's number one. Number two, we have to raise girls with a strong sense of self. I never got messed with. Gary Slade from Slate Music actually told me he was afraid of me. And that is exactly where we want everybody to be. Your children, your dog, anybody, just a little bit nervous. Oh, Molly's here, a little bit nervous. We have to raise women who feel better about themselves. There is nothing right about a sentence that starts with, meet me in my hotel room at 3 a.m. for an audition. There's only two things that happen in a bedroom. Sex and sleeping. If you're tired, go home. My little word to all you girls. You know, we gotta own some of this shit. We have to own some of this, we girls. If I was a white man right now, I'd be terrified. But we girls have to own some of this stuff. And it's in any business. Music business is no different. I'm sure in the 80s, if I had blonde hair and big boobs, I'd have been a way bigger star than the little funny looking little brown skinned girl over there in the corner sounding like Steve Tyler from Aerosmith. Pretty sure I would have had a bigger career. Anyhow, I'm sure I didn't answer everything, but there are dicks everywhere, swinging in the breeze. Are there any other questions? Or
Surely not in this room.
Have I terrified everyone? Have I terrified everyone?
Any more questions? Any more questions? You have a legend here.
Question.
I have a question. So, like, as the female band leader, like,
Yeah.
for example, like, I'm just moving into that domain now, or I'm hiring you on the gig, and I have guys that don't want to they don't want to take direction from me.
Yeah, okay. Here's what you gotta do. Start smoking cigarettes so you lower your voice. So you sound way meaner. Meaner.
May I just interject?
Maybe not mean, but just...
We have an actual doctor here, Dr. John Chong, probably wouldn't agree with that. Is there another way to...
You know, it's time. You know, if you're focused on what you need to get your band going, and you're focused on that, over time, you'll gain gravitas around that. Also, try and stick with the same musicians. Don't be fucking different, because you kind of have to start again every time. I have to spend, not anymore of course, but I used to spend an awful lot of time proving to the boys in my band that I wasn't that singer, that I wasn't gonna be all, it's cold, oh, I need some water, somebody got me tea. And I wasn't gonna be her. I was gonna be in the van, I was gonna not be one of the boys, but be one of the people. So boys had to, Did that answer any?
I have one. Just can I just make a suggestion? Also, we was in bands for a long time. I think that if you have guys you're the leader, and there's guys in your band who are being goofs and not listening to what you have to say, get different guys.
Yeah.
Exactly. Bravo.
You know what?
Because they're out there.
It's actually not hard. If there's one thing this city has probably a few too many of, is musicians. I mean, we really have we really have a lot of them. I really think it's about finding the right chemistry and finding the right guys or the right girls. Doesn't hurt to put a few girls in the band, and it does. You know, the more often you use the same people, you build those relationships. You build those ways of talking. I mean, for me, as far as jazz is concerned, it's all about the improvisation, and that's where I'm sitting, listening to the band. By the way, I'm not scatting. I'm sitting, listening. You know, Wayne Shorter said it best, you can't rehearse the unknown. You can't, but you can have dinner. I find dinner is often more impactful than the rehearsal. I don't spend a lot of time rehearsing. We kind of run tunes and sound check. We spend more time eating, talking, laughing, building those relationships. That's how you get what Robbie, Mike, and I have, for instance. That's a magic, unbreakable, ridiculous piece of music when you get the three of us in a room, because that's solidly 15 years, the three of us. Mike and I longer, but, right? So it's about relationships, it's about getting people that work with, you know, that you feel comfortable with, and that listen to you, and respect you. They're out there. They're out there. I guarantee you, they're out there. I know that because I booked 400 of them at my Kensington Market Jazz Festival.
We have time for one more question, if there is one, because we have to move on. We have one more speaker today. Any more questions? Once.
Molly,
He's afraid.
you mentioned that you were doing stuff with the Black History Society.
Yes, Canadian Black History Projects is my little thing. And what am I doing?
Yeah, talk about that.
I get TD Bank to fund stories that I find around Canadian Black history. So it started with the Book of Negroes, and I'm working towards getting that into the high school curriculum, because the only book on racism in the high school curriculum is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Please.
For 4 years of high school, that's your book. It's brutal. I've got Lawrence Hill writing the teacher's aid to that book, because you need to know how to teach it. I mean, you don't get rid of Huckleberry Finn. You find a way to teach Huckleberry Finn. You don't change history, you teach history. You can't erase stuff. We got to build on stuff. So that was a big piece. Right about now, I'm working on an amazing documentary on Daisy Peterson, who was, I could go on, and Daisy Peterson, in a nutshell, was the piano teacher to Oscar, Joe Seeley, and Oliver Jones, to name 3 piano players you may have heard of. Daisy went to McGill University in the 40s, the only black girl, the only girl in that music program. She cleaned houses to do that. Daisy Peterson started the Montreal Mass Choir. Daisy Peterson is a force, and I get to do a documentary with my brother, Clark Johnson, and Charles Officer, the wonderful black director here in Canada. My brother is a film and television director. Google him. So he's amazing, and he gave me such fantastic advice about telling the Daisy Peterson story, i.e., don't bring Oscar into it till almost the end, or it will become Oscar's story. And I thought, there's my goofball, brilliant brother with that one sentence that's going to shape how we do that. If this is a successful 45-minute piece, I have 7 other great Canadian Black history stories I want to tell. I get to sit on the board of Historica, so you may see some color folk in those commercials, and you may have seen the odd Indigenous personnel creeping into those Historica minutes. They've been an amazing partner with me on quite a few of these projects. Again, this is absolutely using my powers for good. TD Bank wouldn't give me a time of day. I come in there and totally sprinkle stardust all over those idiots and take their money.
Well, the story needs to be told.
There are many stories that can be told about Canadian blacks who've been in this country
Hey man, I
for
grew up.
200 years.
Yeah, I grew up like you, and people come up to me, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Toronto." "Where are you family from?"
I
"I'm
tell
from
people
Canada."
I'm Obama black.
They don't, a lot of people didn't understand back then what it was. And
Yeah.
I'm mixed like you, and I grew up in that world, but our music is root. I grew up in the history. My family came from the Underground Railroad, so when I hear you talking about that and the stuff that I write for the black community,
Right.
you know, the black Canadian community specifically,
And
is
having my office in the epicenter of Kensington Market, this was the black community of Toronto in the 40s and 50s.
yeah.
That liquor store on Spadina used to be a club called Soul Palace. And I shouldn't have been in there at 15 years of age, but guess what? That's where I was. That
Paramount.
corner of Spadina and Dundas was epicenter to Toronto black people. The churches were there. That's why those projects are there. Black folk, right there. Happy Village, I like to call it. Alexander Park is what you may call it. That is having an amazing renovation, and I get to be a part of that, in that I'm a part of the community center. My jump is to that.
Good
So
for you.
that neighborhood is very much a part of Canadian black history. And for all our immigrants and young black kids coming to Canada to not know that there were black folk living here way before the West Indians came in the 70s.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Like, let's face it, Trudeau Sr. brought 70,000 black people to Canada in the 70s. Prior to that, there were black folk here.
Yep.
Not very
That's right.
many, especially in Toronto, because they got from the underground coming up through Halifax, through Montreal, and but you know, they came across St. Catharines this way, right from the lake. So there's amazing stories, and they're not being told in our schools, and they're not being told to our young people. And we don't teach this properly, and it's a goal of mine, which is frankly, way more important than a Grammy nomination, is getting these stories told to my young Canadian kids. I think it's
Molly Johnson, folks.
Thank you very much.
Molly will be on display for the next 10 minutes if you. We're going to spend 10 minutes setting up for the next speaker. We're going to hear from Dr. John Chong. Please stick around. I promise you it will be fascinating as well. 10 minutes, folks. Please come back.
Yeah. Stand up. Touch the lens.
Wow. Were you there? Stand in front of those people.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah.
What's your name? It's always to meet you. Yes, you may, yes.
Here, I'll take the, do you want me to take this?
Nice.
I also would like to know.
Can you do me here just because I got to set up the next guy? We'll do the photos over there. Yeah. So you know what? It's not me because I got to set up. So can we have someone? Oh, thank you so much.
I'm on the late. How are you?
Make us look smart in front of these things. Make us look smart. Music teacher. Grade 7. Oh, here we go. Dial it right back.
You want some water? Anything? I already know how that works.
And the drums on the back, so what's going on. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
and now everybody, we love it now. So thank you. I want to know that.
You know, what I did was I actually tricked him into going to I guilted him, but this was a different time of year, and I guilted him. I said, birthday, you're not going. You know, and I just made a big deal of it. And then when we went, I managed to get a set of keys, which I love keys, and then gave him back his keys. And then while I was gone, I got my production guys to come in and say, my production guy and his dad, 70-year-old men, and measuring and weighing and figuring it out. Changed everything. It changed the way we went.
Because everyone then is, when you walk through the entrance, before you went, you see the band.
Yeah, and a good cover charge. When you're this far away from the artist,
No.
that's not going to work.
There were so many times where I'd be on stage, like right there at the door. Right. People would come in.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
Silver impossible.
so whatever you're doing.
I'm like,
Test.
Just about an hour.
Try to go 35, 40.
I experienced a lot of things very hot. Now I'm finally so I'm kind of like getting myself prepared. It's like
So your email, no?
yeah. Well, my JV EP.
and Java.
Yeah.
And your PDSB,
I'm gonna check out your thing. Then actually find out well, I played on a lot of sessions, so and then I only get paid once for those sessions, so I'm like,
yeah. I've been doing classical, doing classical lately. Just the house at times wrecked. I have no job, so I can't get my hands full. So I'm just looking forward. I love jazz music. I sing some Latin music.
Oh, cool.
I have a very good ear, and I do, so I can do both. And Brad said that I wonder how you get into that.
You know, I got into hook up with different studios. I should go to the studios and talk to them.
Oh, right on, okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I find that studios have, yeah, just like there's Canada, there's a bunch of studios in town that are for certain types of music. In a sense, I mean, they're all for any music, but I don't focus on certain things.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? So that's it. And viola, I mean, sure. You know, a violin and a viola, everybody likes strings. Not everybody can afford strings.
I just found you on LinkedIn.
Well, everybody, you know, in my world, it's like porn section. Everything on top is going to be porn section. You know what I mean? And then when you pick in strings on top, that's very specific. Because, you know,
To the thing?
there's not much recorded in this. You know, I would like some strings and some focus stuff there.
Yeah, but you know, viola can be really raunchy, bluesy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
great.
sure.
I can play like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't even have to be electric.
Yeah,
I've jammed with like an no, it's
Yeah. The viola thing that's got more of a rounder tone. I'll be right back.
Like, I think all the speakers have really emphasized.
I just like
And so it's kind of high inside, but I haven't actually come and seen it before. To take people clean and do it so
I got a lot of people that if it was like a list, I'd say, I feel like I might like this one.
I think that you would be.
Oh, really? Wow. That's actually like... There's so many... like part of this like cohort, just like clan. I keep easy. Like you got like big
Yeah, and having pictures of real listeners and stuff, okay? Oh, no.
I walked from
No, but she was in and out of surgery. I've been watching.
Were you there too? Yeah, you would have been there too. Oh my god. Oh yeah. You want to get your piece of paper and take yeah.
So as Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different. If we can come together here to give us your attention up here, please. Dr. John Chong is a fascinating character. He is a pianist of great ability himself in the classical field, I believe. He's also a doctor and has managed to combine these things into a thriving and extremely helpful business. He runs the Musicians Clinics of Canada, which has offices here in Hamilton. Anywhere else? Or just, yeah. And he's treated musicians with repetitive strain injuries, motor control problems, anxiety, depression. It's artist, music-specific medicine. Because I think, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, if you heard them, I think that this is something that we need to think about, and I don't think people in music, in the music business or workers in music in general, think about this stuff enough, at least musicians that I know, and myself included. John is award-winning. He teaches performance awareness at the Glenn Gould School and artist diploma programs at the Royal Conservatory in Toronto. He's the medical consultant for the National Youth Orchestra of Canada. And in 2012, he received the Governor General Diamond Jubilee Medal. He's very accomplished, and he's going to present, I think, a fascinating talk right now. So please put your hands together for John Chong.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much for all of you coming. This beautiful venue at Jazz FM. I'm going to give you some pitches. It feels like the bases are loaded with Miranda, Matt, and Molly. Hard act to follow, but I want to make it as interactive as possible. So that's my background. That's a little graphic to see what I see. Everything's going great. Music's wonderful. You're graduating from school, except something might go wrong. How did I get into this? Well, it did everything wrong, but there is no right or wrong, but managed to get myself pretty badly hurt at the conservatory. So fast forward many years. The field began in the 80s, wasn't my idea. And thanks to science and all the new technology we have, we can now start to study and disseminate evidence about what are these injuries and illnesses about, and how about going to treat them and prevent them. I'll also speak on behalf of Performing Arts Medicine Association, which is our international organization. We have our own journal, and it's very multidisciplinary. So I want to focus today on the awareness of performance stress, and I'll get into the science of what we've been talking about. So I'm much more comfortable with that piano beside me to play it, rather than talking about injuries. But now, certainly in sports, we're thinking about injuries much more. The difference is a lot happens in the studio, and we, of course, admire and adore our wonderful artists. We've heard about it today, how to get there, but all those hours and hours. We heard 10,000 hours, probably even more. And it isn't for the money. We've heard Miranda talk about it, Molly talked about it. That's some pretty hard data from Kelly Hill. It's about 16,000 bucks in this industry genre. So I really still don't know what I want to do when I grow up, because I won't grow up. But having left my music career for composition, electronic music, and piano, decided to go into medicine. Wasn't my idea. I'm Chinese, by the way, so you can figure out the rest of the story. So getting high marks was otherwise the rice stick would come up. So I was at McMaster, actually quite asleep at 3 in the afternoon, waiting to pick up the kids from daycare, whereupon the Organization of Canadian Symphony Musicians, which happened to be the union, wrote to me and said, we need a musicians clinic in Canada. It took me 3 months to reply, which is typical. And luckily we have the Canada Health Act, which goes back to a fellow that is the father of our current Prime Minister. So the Canada Health Act was in there, and I made up this slide in 1986 when we started the clinic, called Madness, and we're still carrying on. I guess I should change that to 2018. Another 86 slide. This is the stuff we see day in, day out. Pain during, after playing, numbness and tingling, weakness and loss of control. So-called playing-related musculoskeletal disorders. That's the classic definition, and without going into a lot of detail, the bottom line is the most important. It's use, which is excessive for the individual affected. So there has to be an excess. This is the data we have. Just highlight it. We have an 84% lifetime prevalence of injury, 50-50 chance of playing hurt. All the risk factors are listed there, from overplaying, not enough rest breaks, not being in great shape, being stressed out, etc. This is some new data, which probably won't surprise you if you happen to read the news every day. This is the average age of death by musical genre. So we have along that away the types of music and the age of death. So we heard about Tom Petty, and I'll just go backwards, Dolores O'Riordan.
Jazz and blues musicians, you're doing good here.
Oh, we just kind of smoke and drink our life away, jazz guys. But you can see it's pretty dramatic compared to the U.S. Expected. The causes of death, again, are what you read about in the paper, chronic disease, and of course, a lot of violence and mental health issues. This is I'll spend a bit more time on this. It's hard to read. Musicians may be up to 3 times more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression compared to the public. So you know the Olympics is on, hopefully, if you're staying up all night to watch it. So in the background, population's about 1 in 5 in Canada. So this is British data, so that's where the 3 times comes from. So simple question, are you anxious, are you depressed? And roughly over 2,000 UK musicians responded and said, yeah, to the rate of 60-70%. Just following up on what Molly was saying, poor working conditions, difficulty sustaining a living, antisocial working hours, exhaustion, administrative planning issues, lack of recognition for one's work, the welding of music and identity into one's idea of selfhood, physical impacts of musical careers such as injuries, and the last but not least is issues related to the problems of being a woman in the industry, from balancing work and family commitments to sexist attitudes and even sexual harassment. Okay, so that's really something to take home. Well, when I started in this, being an engineer as well, I thought, oh, this is easy. This is a slam dunk project. I'll just redesign instruments, get a patent, and then retire somewhere in Malibu. Didn't work out too good. So there's a simple issue of a clarinet and static loading on the right thumb. So guess what, if you're a woodwind player, you'll have a lot of right thumb troubles. If If you're a bassoon player, you'll have a lot of left thumb troubles. So that's kind of pretty straightforward. The common injuries, the concept to take home is where things get squished. Okay, so you see the yellow thing there is the nerve, the muscles contract, and then things get squished and get inflamed. So this is a common forearm repetitive strain injury. We all know what carpal tunnel is, mostly from the electronic gizmos we use very much. Was it 11 hours now? Something like that. And most commonly are hard to diagnose, but are called proximal entrapment syndromes or thoracic outlet. So issues about posture and muscle tension and affecting nerve function as well as blood flow are very, very common.
So what does entrapment mean?
Squished. Squished. Another concept is fried noodles, or I call Chowmein Syndrome. So focal dystonia was originally thought that you were crazy, referred to psychiatry immediately, then they got into Botox, then they got into constraint therapy and all kinds of things. But now with the modern brain scanning techniques, we can now see we have Chowmein Syndrome on the bottom, so fried noodles. You got to be really careful because of the lifestyle issues and exposures to toxins. So we might have a grovelly voice, as Molly said, but be careful. There might be a structural problem beneath the surface. Quick talk about hearing loss. This is the inside of your ear, the inner ear. So it looks like a bombed out area anywhere in the world. So that's what happens to the hair cells. So they get bent over and smashed and injured and they don't come back. The exposures in music are actually quite extraordinary, well over the legal criteria in Ontario, but we're not going to shut down all the bars and all the symphonies, of course. So again, you have to protect yourself. So now we have dosimetry just on your cell phone. You can check, what the levels are, and always carry your earplugs in your fanny pack, which I do. Okay, I'll switch to a bit of biology. Musician brains are quite different. We know we are different, but if we actually look into the wiring or the apps, you can see on the left is the auditory motor tract of a musician and a non-musician on the right. So what fires together gets wired together, gets developed, so you can hear these amazing musicians we heard before. The wiring builds up and it's much stronger. Therefore, there might be some issues about something going wrong during that career. One of them is about neurochemistry. So we're going to get into anxiety and depression pretty quickly, and inflammation. This is a very interesting study looking at uptake of dopamine. Everybody knows what dopamine is. Party, that's why we do it. Pleasure, reward, mischief. So you can actually see the areas that light up in the brain, the pleasure centers, the movement centers associated with music. And that's why we do it. It's not for the money, it's for the buzz. Now, put all that together and some laws of neuroplasticity. What fires together gets wired together. So this is sort of a new concept. It certainly wasn't heard of or taught to me in med school, but it sort of makes sense. So the more you use it, the more it gets fused together. Also, we know from practicing all those hours, use it or lose it. So that's an old law. So that's actually what we look like in terms of distribution. So if you happen to be a wind player, you'll have bigger face and lip area. If you're a piano player like me, you have big mitts. And so it's an interesting concept of why we have different presentations of injuries and problems. In the newspapers, it's not new news to us that the mind and body are not separate, but also why are we doing this? We've already heard this numerous times from the previous speakers that authentic self-expression is the key, including but not limited to artistic self-expression. So that's the buzz phrase I want to leave you with on that one. That's what we're all striving for. Yes, pleasure, but also authenticity. So when that doesn't quite work out the way we want it to, we might develop a stress response. So what's the mechanics of this biology of the stress response? Well, it comes from stress hormone called cortisol, which is produced by the adrenal glands, which sit on top of our kidneys, believe it or not. And there's a connection between the brain and various circuits there to the stress hormone production system. And that comes into play when the mind and body perceive that there's adversity, which can come in childhood, education, work, etc. What is that app or circuit? It's the vagus nerve. Simply put, what happens to the vagus stays in the vagus. Anyway, so when everything is all things bright and beautiful, the social engagement system's all perfect, everybody's hunky-dory, and the mind-body system self-regulates beautifully. When you get stressed out, you have an anxiety response, and then when you get overtired and wiped out, the system shuts down. Complicated, but very, very simple. So when you have a stress response, naturally cortisol is produced, stress hormones produced, the body responds with an immune reaction, a defense reaction, and then the predator goes away and it's all good. So that's what goes up must come down. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's the normal stress response. However, with some of the issues you've heard about from our previous speakers and what I've alluded to in the data, what goes up doesn't come down. It goes up, up, and away, fifth dimension. So this stress system gets stuck on because there's no off switch, if you think about it. Right? It's kind of logical. If the predator's still lurking around, without getting too graphic about Me Too, well, this is going to be on, or the financial issues. It's just not going to be solved because it just disappears. Now the problem with the chronic stress response is it's extremely hard on the physiology of the body. So some amazing science has been done that won a Nobel Prize in 2009, showed that 1 year of chronic stress gives us 6 years of biological aging, which is kind of nuts when you think about it. And then, so I'm going to dissect that a little more. And that's why you see so much, not only injury, but also illness in this population, because the stressors are right there. Now, the root of all this is our normal survival system, which I call and regulate all the neural pathways. Okay, they adapt, they do all the calculations, and control the immune system, control all the neural networks, and as well the conductivity of electrical information down, up and down the neural networks. So you mess with them, and then a lot of bad things can happen health-wise. Here's a fairly complicated schematic, again very simple. You have stress from here and there, and you develop this immune response. So now anybody, if you're involved in sort of cutting-edge targeted therapy, you can now start to see some of the wear and tear at a cellular basis. Now, from the mental health point of view, on the left we have some of the depression or anhedonia, that's lack of pleasure, circuitry. On the right we have issues about anxiety and different neurochemistry. So I'm not here to push drugs, far from it, but just to give you an idea, it's pretty complicated neurochemistry, and there are creative ways to go about reducing some of the psychological as well as biological effects of the chronic stress. Now, how does this relate to the muscle issues? So most of the patients that come refer to me come because of playing-related musculoskeletal pain. And yeah, there's some biomechanical issues we deal with straight up and straightforward, but what is new in this, that the autonomic nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight system, is hardwired into the muscles. You think about it, if there's somebody going to get you, you might want to fight them or run away, so it kind of makes sense. except when you have a story going on in the background, okay, about chronic stressor, that will actually continue to affect your muscle system. Now, is this all just a bunch of funny business, or do the Three Stooges actually exist? Well, at Harvard, they've looked at it. Folks with chronic pain, the 3 brain scans on the top compared to controls, those without pain, and you can see the Three Stooges glowing in the dark in the brain. So it's real, just the story made up. Now, this is really important in terms of music education and how we conduct ourselves as a community. You've heard Molly talk about it eloquently, how she's done extremely well in her career, and showed that there is a zero tolerance for bad THC. So that's targeted, humiliating criticism. Okay, so if you've seen the movie Whiplash, I'm sure you all have, it's jazz. That's what it's all about. So it actually lights up parts of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, which is the hub of the mind. Right? You saw that eloquently acted out, as well as the pain, not just bleeding hands in the drummer, but actually physical pain from the whiplashing. What are the elements? Well, the movie says it for itself, but that they've actually isolated the types of psychological maltreatment, and the actual health effect is the same as physical assault. So you're seeing that come out now in the Me Too movement. You know, just can't do something physical while people are being called on behavioral issues. So the risk to health, part of my training is public health, it's not just to be poo-pooed. It's the same as tobacco and asbestos. Okay? So it's heavy duty, and that's policy in pediatrics at the present time. Is there actual evidence that it damages structures? Well, these are really amazing brain scans looking at wiring tracks. So being an engineer in wiring, those red dots you see are differentials between those exposed to anger, parental anger, as well as peer bullying. And you can see the differences between those exposed and control groups. And affects all the neural networks, not just one specifically. Going back to the Nobel Prize work, of course I've turned it into musician talk. There are 4 elements that came out of that chronic stress narratives of the participants in the studies. And I've named them fondly the 4 Teletubbies. They're seeing red, i.e. freaking out. Ruminating, going over and over and over that wrong note I did in the 4th Ballade of Chopin. The threat to ego, well, that guy that has his face all over Steinway, who happens to be Chinese as well. And negative mind wandering. So, geez, if I only had practiced harder, and oh my God. So it's like the Leaf syndrome. You just, I was there in '67, I saw that. Sorry to rub it in, but. Okay, so that shortens telomeres, which are the protective ends of your chromosomes. So that's how some of this biological effect happens, and then the cell blows up and it becomes a mutant and bad things happen. And the immune system doesn't pick them up, and that's why we're such a high-risk population for troubles. Now this is really up my alley. So you notice that there was Miranda and Matt and Molly, and my name doesn't match, so I'm Monkey, one of my favorite tunes by Molly. And what is now being shown, it's not the actual genetic effect, but it's the epigenetic effect of how this all happens. So it's very, very plastic and very sensitive to stress. So you can see if all things bright and beautiful, it's all nice and green, and then stuff happens, as you heard, and then it all turns horrible very quickly. So this is some really interesting data from McGill. So how do you protect yourself? So there's my stage name, Professor Nimchimsky. So you have to protect yourself. It's a tough business, as Molly said. She couldn't say it any better. Just don't put up with it and put out those boundaries. Okay, so whether it be gender boundaries, racial boundaries, musical, artistic boundaries, you just put on your noise canceling headphones and it just doesn't get through. Okay? Easier said than done, because there's an accumulation of stories and narratives that resonate, that build upon each other. So, in summary, the high-risk times for injury are change of teacher or instrument. So I'm talking to you students out there. Intense preparation for a performance. New and difficult repertoire. That's why I couldn't make a living as a Canadian composer. And also prolonged periods of performance without rest. So these are the stories I hear every day in the clinic. You just, we put on that opera that was 4.5 hours and we had 3 rehearsals. I said, what? Are you kidding? Well, we don't have enough money. That's the way it goes. Or the conductor changes the program on Friday morning. That's what happened last Friday morning. The kids somehow had to adapt to it at Current Hall. It's pretty wacky. Okay? So some of the things you can control, but other things you can't. And you just have to be able to roll with the punches. This is another 86 slide. So preventing overuse injuries, lots of rest breaks, which is now evidence-based. Stretching, still controversial. What kind of stretches? How fit should you be? Of course, pay attention to your biomechanics. And I think we heard it today. Listen to your body. Don't play through the pain. It's a good signal. Okay? It's telling you something that's not quite right. And so pay attention. So I did bring the lab along, but usually with the limited time I won't wire anybody up. But the main issue I wanted to show you is that much of this is very much intrinsic to our own physiology, our own makeup. Okay? We're in it because we're artists, we love to perform, we love the audience, we get good at it, but what is actually happening? So we heard that listening to yourself is really, really important. But actually seeing your muscle signals, seeing your heart rate change under certain circumstances, seeing your actual brain waves can be extremely powerful in targeting what you want to do with your own self and your relationship with your somewhat challenging environment. So that's what this rig is here for. So how do we cope? Okay, we saw the injury rates, they're extremely high, probably should be shut down. It's pretty tough business. It's not for the money, we're doing it for the right reasons, for pleasure and for the art. So you got to get tough. So the ABCs are pretty straightforward. Alignment. So as Molly said, she looks perfect at the piano. So perfect posture. Breathing is crucial, because that's the secret in regulating the vagus nerve. Okay, so when you're feeling stressed out, if you breathe, anybody have done yoga and meditation, just let it go. And coordination is everything. So that's what practice is about. But if you're practicing under stress, that stress is going to be wired into your system. So how do you learn how to practice in the studio? By decreasing your stress level, your stress response, and then getting it all perfect. Lifestyle issues are huge. Diet, exercise, something we all need to work on. But more crucially is the focus. What are we actually working on? They call that the flow state. You're seeing that in the Olympics. Boom, it just happens. That's what we strive for. Okay? But we start thinking about what else is somebody thinking about? They're listening to me. Oh my God, there's probably somebody across the ocean who's laughing at me right now. That kind of blows your flow, right? So if you're playing your instrument, that's why having that team that Molly talked about is that you're comfortable, you feel safe, you feel secure, you're in the game, you're well prepared. That's what it's all about. So you see that in the Olympics, man, talk about preparation and executing under incredible pressure. And the goals. Usually I just slip over that goal thing. It's so important you're doing it for the right reasons. Not trying to look good, trying to win that, trying to beat the other guy, trying to get your face on a Steinway poster. You know, doesn't work. Okay, it has to come from your heart, the intrinsic goals, because you love it. There's nothing else you want to do, right? There's no pressure. As Molly said, yeah, I sing, but I have other reasons. My music is a vehicle for my advocacy. Okay. So ponder that. So they're very much intrinsic goals. It's who you are, who your culture is, what your politics is about. So in the clinic, sure, we have, whoops, what's happened here? Very dark. We have all kinds of toys, being an engineer. Maybe David can help us.
I have no idea.
I think,
Is it the space bar?
I don't know.
Can you?
Just advance.
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Cool.
Whoever said that.
Brilliant. Anyways, we have all kinds of biofeedback as well as psychotherapeutic techniques to get you more in tune with yourself. That's the concept. So at a biological level, we want to look at muscles, we want to look at motion and alignment. Obviously the audio video is important to integrate into that, but also heart rate variability, okay? Making sure it's smooth and not jumping all over. Brainwave biofeedback is very powerful because you can actually train yourself to go into the zone. So that was really pushed forward by the Olympic program. Various psychotherapeutic techniques, one of hundreds and hundreds of blends, mindfulness-based techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as psychodynamic therapy, which is standard stuff, as well as a bit of acupuncture, and of course medications when necessary. So it's a bit of a stir fry. It's a bit of like a Chinese buffet when you come in the clinic. You have no idea what's going on. Well, I actually don't know either. Whatever you want. Try this. It works great. It doesn't? Well, try something else. Anyways, that's some of the menus. So here's my control group. So you're probably questioning, is this really scientifically valid? So there's one guy I was invited to study. His name was Garrick Olson. He's one of my big heroes, one of the, I guess, top 5 concert pianists in the world. Notice he's not Chinese. And I flew out to San Francisco, and I said, oh, this Garrick one has agreed to be studied. Oh, great, I'll be there. So he's never been hurt. He won the Chopin when he's just coming out of Juilliard. He does 200 concerts a year. He's now in his 70s, but he's never been hurt, right? I thought, oh, that'd be cool. I wonder what makes this guy tick. So I put on the, in this case, the EMG, electromyography sensors on him. I said, well, what do you do? Well, I meditate every day. I'm thinking, really? It's a waste of time. So he said, okay, meditate. So I put on the machine there for 10 seconds, and you can see there's absolutely blank in terms of muscle. Absolutely dead quiet. It's beautiful. Right? He says, I practice this. I do my yoga every day too. And I get my massage every week. I'm thinking, really? I eat and drink what I want. So, and I play what I want. And no piano company owns me. Okay? The only thing that stresses me out are snowstorms and canceled flights. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So that's him at rest. So that's the default mode network if you're into neurology. So I guess that practice skill of ramping things down. And then I took a page out of Polanski, the pianist, and One Wrong Note You Die. I said, well, why don't you play a bit of the Chopin Ballade in G minor? Sure, no problem. That's all he's done is record all the Chopin. And he goes and blows, in this case, the Yamaha away. And you can see how beautiful his muscle signals. He's using all his muscles in a very clean, crisp way. Right? So very different than what I see in the clinic, of a lot of clenching and holding and stuff that you wouldn't actually see without the EMG. You can feel trigger points and you can get them worked out, but in terms of function, you can see how clean his muscle output is. and precise as playing. Now it's a bit unfair, he's 6'4", huge hands, career to dream for, but in terms of technique, he was the perfect guy to study. And also lifestyle-wise, perfect guy to do an interview. So the prevention of overuse is the control of use. So in spite of the way I started, it's pretty depressing data. Oh my God, this is horrible. But we do have the power individually and also collectively to reduce these injury rates, by awareness, by training, the way we raise young students, obviously the way we deal with the industry at large. We've talked about that today, so really don't need to get into it too much. Okay, so I managed to get it done pretty good. Okay. Okay, I really wanted to leave some time for questions because this is just the science, the evidence. There's many ways to play it, so just open it up.
Hi.
Hi.
I had to deal with stage fright with the performance because as soon as I had a choke on a stage, because of that humility, I was really sweating and getting thirsty up there, and I don't know, I had it the hard way. I asked a lot of professors like how to overcome this, and what I did was I just practiced like 100 times more to overcome that, and because I practiced so much, I had better results in the future.
Sure.
And because I went through that stage of fright and anxiety, it made me a better musician to overcome that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I went through that, I had to work harder, I had to practice harder. Do you have anything to say about how to overcome stage fright?
Sure. Well, that's the Asian way of dealing with it. Work harder! That's what my dad used to say. You're not as good as Harvard, let's go to medical school. Go to medical school. It's even worse, trust me. So anyways, if you apply the neuroplasticity, so you add in the relaxation or the breathing or the yoga techniques or whatever into your practicing while you practice, okay, so what Garrick does, and it becomes, you just relax and safe and secure. And you go into your zone, and short of a nuclear attack, everything's okay, right? But again, you got to practice those stress reduction techniques is what you're doing. So it's the same way as the athletes. You keep crashing on the ski hill, well, you're going to end up in an ambulance, helicopter. So they practice with videos, with the brain waves on, so they're kinesthetically absolutely right on, but also that fear response is attenuated because they're used to it. And race car drivers do that too with simulators. Astronauts do that.
You came a lot from the expectation.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I'm gonna kill this show, and a lot of people are gonna give me high fives.
Yeah.
But what if I choke? People are not gonna talk to me.
That's the monkey mind. Okay, so it just goes wild and makes up all kinds of silliness. So don't listen to them. Yep.
So a while back I went to school to study to be a physical therapist. There are a lot of examples, learning all the hundreds of muscles and such, right? And you get nervous. So what I used to do is I used to visualize stuff, especially for practical. There was like OPs, stuff like those. And it worked. I would visualize like from the first moment to the last. And then I found when I was under examination, I wasn't as stressed out or nervous. So in your experience, have you used visualization techniques?
That's all part of the alchemy of the psychotherapy, the imagery techniques, rewriting the narrative. I'm the master. So Kenny Werner wrote that, Effortless Mastery, way back. It's a classic. Some pretty good meditation. There's a website called Bulletproof Musician. you can go to that has tons of light goes on. And that's built with good teaching, good support. Yep.
I think sometimes if you're under constant press, you start to lose your perspective on that you are under stress. So do you have any tips or things where you would, any point, just stop and then take an assessment of yourself without having to do all the kind of fun gadget stuff?
Yeah.
So, I don't know, be like, look where your posture is, or look where, anyway, do you have a thing kind of to go through to assess your own level of stress in a moment of time?
There are new gizmos you can get yourself. There's, believe it or not, there's a set of glasses called the Muse, which actually measures your brain waves. And you can actually see how stressed out, screwed up your brain is, and then do the games and exercises and learn to calm it down. There are also apps you can buy for your iPad or your computer that measures your heart rate variability, which is a couple $100, and you can see, oh my God, I'm speaking and my heart rate's 150, like, Jesus, and all red zone, and then you again practice to bring it in back into the green zone. So there's all kinds of self-assessment gizmos now that are available, which are really, really useful. So, yeah.
Can you recommend something for protection of your ears when you're on stage? I mean, I carry earplugs with me when I remember. If I don't, I find a cocktail napkin and some water, shove it in my ears. But for when I'm on stage, I'm very concerned because some of the musicians I've worked with now have tinnitus.
Yep.
And I don't want it.
Yeah. Hot topic. Earplugs. How good are they? How flat are they? Most of the especially in the classical musicians say, it's really hard to play in an orchestra, but what choice do you have? So they have barriers and all kinds of different seating, etc. You see that at Roy Thompson. The brass section is exiled way back in the back. It still sounds the same. Mahler's Mahler. In terms of the jazz stage or the rock stage, in-the-ear monitors are the way to go. Now they're more expensive, but your choices are, I can't hear, I got tinnitus, I'm just a mess. I'm going to be like Eric Clapton and 90% of the rest of the musicians. So that's something that's really preventable, and it's worth the investment to link it into your sound system, and it's all controlled, not just for the guys that win Junos and Orders of Canada. So Marshall, the audiologist, can fit you with those. They're all custom molded, etc. The earplugs, the straight out of the box, ER15s or 25s, they're uncomfortable, but it's good to have them. When I go to the mod club, God forbid, at my age, it's great. You just stick them in, and So the orchestra musicians will have them. It's been a real political tough road just to get hearing tests as well as earplugs if needed, but we're getting through and trying to make it more mandatory in the schools. That's now part of accreditation for all the American music schools. We include marching bands and all the jazz programs. So that's 644 music schools under the umbrella of National Association of Schools of Music. So they put hearing first, injuries, neuromusculoskeletal, and then we've just doing a collaborative project on psychological health, all this anxiety, depression stuff, and of course overdosing and suicides. So again, awareness is number one. Do your dosimetry. Instead of getting the symptom, you're overexposed, put in a protective device and keep play on happily. Okay.
Is this PowerPoint available on to look at?
I can forward it by Dropbox to David, so you can get it.
Yeah, all of you have my email address because I emailed you about this event.
Yeah.
So please, I'll make sure that John does that, and just email me if you want it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could talk about different instruments that sort of might lead to more weight on one side of the body. You showed us the diagram of the piano player that you studied, and I'm not primarily a piano player, but I feel like there's a more symmetrical aspect to your body when you play it. You briefly talked about clarinet's on one thumb, bassoon's on another thumb, saxophone leads to one side, violin leads to one side. Like, how can you account for being relaxed and being really aware of your body when, or playing correct posture? Everything that you promote with the instrument naturally leads to one side of the body.
Well, this gadget's really useful for quantitatively analyzing asymmetry. So if you go to put my name, Daily Planet, you'll see me doing a little demo with the gizmo with Linnea, a violinist at University of Toronto for Daily Planet. You can sort of look at the squishing of the shoulder and thoracic outlet issues, or rotator cuff in the right shoulder. Same goes for bass players, bent over, and huge forces on the left hand. French horn this way, etc. Okay, so, and you can sort of measure the muscle function in terms of asymmetry. You can look at power output and do all kinds of adaptation, and then to design an exercise program or a stretching program or something to offset some of the asymmetry.
Okay. I find that like when I'm in a stressful situation or I have a lot of projects going on at the same time, I'm not stressed, but I find I have like residual stress after the deadlines are all gone. Yeah. Do you have any and I'm sure like a lot of people feel that, do you have any tips on like how to like de-stress yourself after the fact?
Well, short of a trip to Havana, which is where I'm supposed to be now, except we have a slight problem south of the border to organize our study trip. But other than that, just regular practice of stress reduction, whatever works for you. Right? So if you're into yoga, awesome. If you're into meditation, mindfulness meditation, awesome. Anything that down regulates. Okay. Of course, we go to the bar, and after 2 or 3 pints of whatever, then there are side effects at my age. Or now wine works pretty nicely. Now, one very serious point: just stay away from opiates. Okay. So you go to the sports clinic, you go to Emerge, you're just going to get. Well, I think they're clamping down now, but certainly in my day, you walk away with your 100 Percocets. Don't fill it out. Okay, don't go down that route. Okay, because we saw Prince at the Super Bowl, but he's dead. Okay, Michael's dead. Okay, and Tom Petty, I didn't know. Sort of suspected. Dolores, same thing. It's just once you're in there, you'll reach for it because, as you well know, heroin was the drug of choice for jazz musicians. Well, it's perfect. It just takes away all your emotional pain. Everything's groovy. You play great. It's wonderful. There's unfortunate problems. So we miss Bill Evans and many, many others, Ray Charles, because of that. So it's the same thing happens, except that now you can just get it anywhere. It's rampant in the community. And my young associate, Dr. McMillan, he's not here. He's just spent 30 hours awake in the last 32. He's just taken a side job as a coroner. So many of those are fentanyl overdoses. And so it's brutal out there. So just don't go there. You've got a friend, you know somebody, a relative, boom. Get them some help. Yep.
Wondering how much real, what I'm trying to say is that when you get older, you have aches and pains, wake up in the morning and you're not feeling like you did 20 years ago. And that's very common with me right now. My hands, I play a lot. Hey, that's just life. But how much do you put that to say, okay, it's just because I'm getting older? I'm in my 50s. I probably got more pain since I turned 50 prior to being that. And should I say, okay, well, sometimes I wake up, my hands are so sore, I can't move my fingers until I stretch them. So how much of that is just that, or I'm doing something incorrectly, or can I correct it?
Yeah, so that's the inflammatory response I glossed over, right? Yeah. So you just got to do your honest self-inventory.
But how much is it just I'm getting older? Because that's the way I live. I said, well, I'm not worried about it. I'm older, so whatever. I'm still going to do my gig. I play in pain, like you said, but that's life. That's my life. I'm not going to say no to a gig because my fingers hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So you get it assessed, you get it treated, We have safer medications, which will become legal in July maybe. But as a physician, that's my main gun right now. I used to use all those fancy
Just say,
drugs.
when you get older, it's okay, there's something out there
Yeah,
for you.
but something's going on, so from an inflammatory point of view, not just overuse, but there's an immune system. So it's a bit of a wild goose chase to find out, is it childhood stuff, or is my current situation, or what am I thinking about, all those Teletubbies.
So when you say you got hurt when you were younger, like, I used to be a fighter, so it was because of that? Like, I mean, I'm saying it's like use of the hands, or overuse in a sense, so that kind of concept.
Yeah, well, it's use of all the circuitry, just not the muscles and tendons. Okay, that's what you need to think of. Where are those Teletubbies floating around, the psychological stuff? Also biological, you got to get your annual physical and check out all those things. Bad things do happen and grow, and, or clog up, etc. So we're lucky to have a great healthcare system in Canada to get that done. So get it done, right? Yeah, we're getting old, but you're over 50. I'm going to be collecting my old age security in a couple of weeks. I could go down to pay some of the mortgage, hopefully, and the pianos and other past sins. But and my mom passed away a year ago. She was 103. So I'm thinking, I don't know, Mom. So she did something right. And she wasn't part of all this glory and traveling around and doing.
A lot of the older cats that I talk to, when they say you got these aches and pains, they say, well, you're just getting old, man. Just getting old, that's it.
Yeah,
and I'm still playing at 70 and 80 years old. So I just wrote that, not worried about it.
Yeah. Well, we all have stresses, Recall we talked about some of the great musicians that have come and gone. Jackie Washington made it to 89, laughing all the time. Even though life was just horribly miserable, as you probably know. But he always looked on the bright side.
Great player.
Great player, too. Yeah. Miss him dearly. As well as Jeff, we heard about today. Tough, but always had that side of authentic work, and then worked with Jack quite a bit.
It's better seem to live the longest according to that chart.
Well, maybe because of the heroin, maybe. No, there's a different way of being, I think, between musical genres. I think if you just look at the popular music from punk and all the violence and rampant drugs and stuff like that, well, jazz is not so bad. As long as you cut back the booze and get off the tobacco, stay reasonably fit, you can have a very long, productive career and make an incredible contribution if you stay healthy. So one of my lines is, Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake. I have that on my dining room table. Well, I twist that. Said, without health, right, music would be a mistake. So really, once you get hurt, or depressed and whatever, all these maladies that I see day to day, life becomes really a bummer. It really takes the fun out of what you're trying to do. And you see that every day, what are these guys suffering over? That's what every time I see it, who knows tomorrow who it's going to be. But man, oh man, incredible contributors artistically. What the hell's going on? Right? But nobody's really sat down with them and said, hey, let's look at some of the biology, look at some of the psychology, look at some of the social, biopsychosocial issues that are affecting you. What can you do to make some changes? So it's not just an individual thing by far. I mean, the individual is affected, but it's a community effect. So you say jazz, well, there's certain demographic features in that community. Well, in the punk scene, it's Sid Vicious and all, it's pretty brutal in what you're seeing. And in the rock and roll, well, luckily we have very powerful spokespersons to speak out. Eric Clapton's come out swinging about his issues and trying to educate the next generation. So, which is what Pamela's been trying to do, bring the artists. We had Phil Dwyer here a year ago, and Steve Page, and some of the classical musicians, and Tom Wilson talk about their real life struggles on the road and in their careers. It's astoundingly powerful. So you can access those videos on the PAMA website, artsmed.org, go to Toronto Meeting 2017. It's just amazing, you know, what people disclose and how they cope, with a lot of humor as well. So they do appreciate, you know, how lucky they are to be an artist in Canada, and to be Canadian and put forward our way of being. So I think that's important, that we appreciate how lucky we are and how important it is to look after our health. Otherwise the whole mission's lost. Good. I've got my Nietzsche quote in there.
Based on that, on health and on your polyvagal theory,
yeah.
You mentioned diabetes and psychosis. Are they more likely to get hurt more often? Are they starting from below and have to be more conscious that they've started on a different level than the artists at the most part?
I'm not sure I get your question, but are you
basically, if from that theory, you had sort of a sidearm of diabetes and psychosis and other neurological disorders, are they more likely to not succeed? Are they more likely to have injuries more often? Because they're starting from that place without knowing this is real.
Sure, yeah. So the usual presentation, you have a lump or you end up in emergency with a diabetic event, or you end up with a heart attack or a stroke, or in Jacqueline Dupre's case, MS. So that's how the Western healthcare system is. You go in and then you get into the subspecialty and then eventually you hit the basement. And
but from a musical point of view, have you seen any evidence that they are starting to, like, I'm just thinking of children who come up with diabetes and get diagnosed at early age with things like musculoskeletal. Are they already going to have, they're going to have a bigger challenge?
Yep. Yeah, those risk profiles have been done. Go to Felitti, not Fellini, Felitti, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It's a massive study of close to 20,000 individuals followed forward in a beautiful place I'd like to be now, San Diego. You know, all the morbidity and mortality data is just being followed. It's like astounding. So, you know, whether it be tumors or be addictions or suicides or other issues. So that's the Kaiser Permanente is putting big bucks into that. And I think NIH is still funding it. That could be under threat as well. So, but it's amazing the kind of work.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Just wondering, I work, for example, the average person might work for a corporation, you get health benefits for your family, dental, and you know, money that lets you go to a naturopath and all that stuff. So for musicians, can we get health benefits through the musicians union, or is there some kind of protection so that we can enjoy family health benefits and we can come see you and pay your fees?
Well, you're covered under the Canada Health Act, OHIP.
OHIP, I know, but you know when you get like health benefits, you get like dental, and massage, and psychotherapy, and all that great stuff that we could totally benefit from. Just wondering if like the musicians union offers that, if anyone knows.
We've been talking to all the insurance companies for years. They sort of classify us as Formula One race car drivers. I found that in the bar after a hockey game. I said, what's with you guys? He says, oh, we know you guys. We can't make any money off you. So I get my benefits, still $900 a month for the clinic. It's $900 a month for old geezer me and my secretary and her kids. So since government's gonna pay for my blood pressure pills, we can probably stop that. Because I can't spend $900 on me or my staff. So you just gotta negotiate. But that's what I got through, through my medical connections. So again, it's up to the union to negotiate, or broadcast that on an advocacy basis. It's a big problem. So we're just even fighting for, you know, getting a contract and maintaining some semblance of OHIP provincial health services. So it's tough. When you're in the States, it's unbelievable. It's a joke, you know, in terms of just carrying health insurance. Just an absolutely healthy 30-year-old woman would be, and her one kid, one on the way, would be paying $600 US per month, just in San Diego. Just, you know, like what the heck? Yeah, so it's the insurance company, and that's Obamacare, so now it's being stripped thanks to Trump Care. So one of our pet projects is the New Orleans Musicians Clinic, okay, down in New Orleans. So Bethany Boltman has a collective foundation through the community which raises monies, okay, but not paid for health care, or it goes a bit to the clinic for the support staff, but it actually goes to the bars and to provide jobs for the musicians. So they go and work, and they make money. They get their services covered at the clinic. And it was better obviously under Obamacare, but you know, so that's another model, a collective way of working. So don't expect to get a handout from the banks, thanks TD, and or the insurance companies, thanks Manulife, but they're out for profit. Okay. So that's kind of a arm-wavy answer to you know, getting benefits. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're at 5:36, and this event is supposed to go at 5:30. So we need to wrap it up. Please give a warm round of applause.
Thanks very much for your attention.
And thanks for attending today, folks. Please fill out those surveys and leave them here on the panel. It would be perfect if you do that for me, please.
Turn the light up.